duplicate. I have a symbol here or a group, and I want to duplicate that a certain number of times up the rafter, and I'd really like it to be always the same distance. This technique requires offset duplications. There's an arrow here, click on that arrow, and down the bottom you'll find Vectorworks Preferences. Under the Edit tab of your Vectorworks Preferences, I need this Offset Duplications to be ticked. If it's not ticked, please tick it, otherwise our technique won't work. We go to the corner, we start dragging this object up, keep the mouse button down. I want a specific distance, 24 inches, enter. Control key on a Windows machine, Option key on a Macintosh. You'll see a little plus turn up next to your cursor when you've done that. Let go of the mouse button and then take your finger off the keyboard. Now if you go up to Edit and you say Duplicate, it'll be exactly the same angle and exactly the same distance. I often use the keyboard shortcut, Control D or Command D. Just going to fit to page area again. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and go to the next layer down. Duplicate array. Duplicate array. Select your object first, then go to Edit on the menu bar and choose Duplicate Array. This allows you to create a linear, rectangular or circular array. We'll choose linear. The offset for this is 20 feet in the X direction. Nothing in the Y direction that would move it up or down, and nothing in the Z or Z direction. Click OK, and it creates a duplicate object and it moves it the specified distance. We'll just delete that. There's another duplicate option. If you drag your cursor, hold down your Control key on a Windows machine or the Option key on a Mac, you can make a copy. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next layer down, Stretch. I'm going to select these objects here. And when I try to move them, you'll notice I can't move them because they don't have the blue handles. If I go to this option here, the unrestricted scaling mode, I can click and I can move those, but it's not a genuine stretch, it's a scaling. And you'll notice the distance between these two changes as I make it smaller or make it larger. I'm just going to select everything. Select all. Now I'm going to use the Reshape tool. I'm going to click at P1, hold my mouse down, let go about P2, and now when I click and drag, this is a genuine stretch. If I do it here as well, drag my cursor over there, I can stretch these objects and they were genuinely stretching them, and the relationship between the rectangle and the line stays fixed. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and click on the next exercise down. Compose. In this case, I've got an object with lots of parts to it. I'm going to select all of those just by dragging my cursor over there, modify on the menu bar, and compose. And it joins all those together into a single object. This is great because now we can add a fill to it. We can also extrude it. We can do mathematical calculations on it. And the other thing I'd like to show you is modify and decompose. And decompose will break it up into its component objects. In this case, 156. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Smoothing. I've got some polygons here, and I want you to select them and then go to Modify, Poly Smoothing, and choose Bezier Spline Smoothing to start with. Undo that. Now go to Modify, Poly Smoothing, and choose Cubic Spline. You see it's quite a different result. Undo that as well. modify, poly smoothing, arc smoothing. This will turn this polyline into genuine arcs, and you can see the start and stop of all the arcs with those little grey lines. Undo that and go back to modify, poly smoothing, and choose radius smoothing. And it's a very similar result. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next exercise down. So let's select these two to start with. Modify on the menu bar, align and distribute, and we want to align those to the left. And you'll notice that the left-hand most object stayed where it was, and the one that was towards the right moved across. I'm just going to undo that. I'd also like to show you that you can right-click and choose Align and Distribute, and choose Align Left. Now, just to remind you, I right-clicked on my circle, that is the rightmost object. When I choose Align Left, the square will move across. Let's try these two here. Modify, Align, Distribute, and we'll align these to the right. So you notice the square moved across. If I do the similar thing that I did just before, let's align to the right, but this time the circle moves across because I right-clicked on my square. In group 4, I'd like you to go Align, Distribute, and this time I'd like you to distribute the center of those objects and distribute the center of those objects. This is vertical, this is horizontal. Okay, and you can see I've now got all of those circles in a great line. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next exercise down. Join. Select those two lines, modify, join, and join. Select all these ones and we'll do the same thing. Modify, join, and join. Try using the other options, the join with no fillet. Try the different options just so you can see which ones work in different situations. When you finish that, go to your navigation palette and choose the next exercise down. Add surface. The easiest way to draw a complex object is to draw a series of simple objects, select them all, right-click, and choose Add Surface. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button or go to your navigation palette and choose the next layer down. I've got an oval and a square. Select them both, right-click, and clip surface. And you'll notice that the uppermost object, that's the oval, has taken a bite out of the square. You can drag it apart or you can delete it. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next layer. Intersect surface. I've got two circles, right-click, intersect surface, and there's the intersection of my two shapes. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next layer down. Arc into segments. Select the arc, modify on the menu bar, drafting aids, and arc into segments. How many segments do we want? Let's make it 3 segments, and we can either divide it evenly or we can choose a segment length that we want to work with. We can either draw a polygon or draw lines. And so that's put a polygon that evenly divides that arc. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next exercise down. Line into segments. Modify on the menu bar, drafting aids, line into segments. And this will place a loci. It will break the line into segments, or we can leave the original line intact. Let's create 3 segments. Okay. And so it's broken the line, the original line is left there, and it's created loci at those 3 points. When you finish that exercise, go to your navigation palette and choose the next layer down. Create dividing lines. This might look a little unusual until you see how it works. So let's go Modify, Drafting Aids, and Create Dividing Lines. So we click on the first line, click on the second line. This is going to be the start of my dividing lines, and this is the length of my dividing lines. How many do we want? Let's make it 15. Okay, and it creates 15 lines evenly divided through that quadrant. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button or go to your navigation palette and choose the next layer down. This polyline has 321 vertices. If I go to my Reshape tool, you'll see that there are a lot of vertices along there, and it could be quite hard for us to manipulate this polygon. Modify, Drafting Aids, and Simplify Polys. Now the maximum deviation is how far away from the original line are we willing to accept. Let's make it 1 inch, 25 millimeters, and let's see what happens. And now you'll notice there's only 36 vertices along that polygon. Later on, when we're using polygons to create site models for architects or landscapers, this Simplify Polys will be extremely useful. Now you'll notice that it does change the polygon, and you can see that it's now got pointy corners or corner vertices. But on the other hand, it's also reduced by 90% the number of vertices, making it much easier to manipulate. This is the last exercise in this lesson. This lesson is extremely useful, and I think you should come back to this lesson every couple of months until you've learned all of these tools and techniques. If you leave Vectorworks for a while and you come back to it, go back through these movies so that you can refresh your memory on how to use these basic fundamental tools. This is the end of lesson 3.4. In this lesson you learned how to use basic creation tools, you learned how to use basic editing tools, and you learned how to use basic editing commands.